I've had 2 sessions.
I'd like to call the Government House meeting to order. Do we have quorum?
Yes.
Almost.
Okay, thank you. I need a motion to accept the minutes from the June 22nd meeting. Who would like to make that motion? Matt?
Paul's raising his hand, but I'll second it.
Okay. Paul, and then Matt seconds it. Any omissions, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Opposed? Carried. First up is the county attorney.
I'll even turn my camera on for this august occasion. So the first thing I usually talk about at these meetings is the cybersecurity officer's report. We are still, she's still working from home. We don't have the official stats done, but I anticipate we'll have that for you next month as we're closer to operations now. We'll have a sense of what's going on in terms of our internet traffic picking up again and penetrations. A lot of people have had time on their hands, and I know we've had a couple fishing expeditions that Karen's notified folks of, so it's still going on out there. So we still need to be vigilant. I think I say that every meeting, but it's true. And then the second thing on my agenda is actually their personal discussions we had from the administrator, so I'm going to punt to the administrator.
Yep. So I had brought this up at the last personnel committee that the request to move forward with filling the coordinator to the safety officer position. So as a brief recap, there was a safety officer and a senior safety officer position. The person holding the safety officer position resigned to take a different job, and the county attorney worked with the personnel officer and found that in going through the needs of the department, a new title of coordinator to the safety officer was more appropriate. During last fall's budget process for the 2020 budget, that new position, which is not an additional one, but a title, was approved by the board as part of the adopted budget with a start date of July 1st. And so now that we are 3 weeks past that, there was discussion at the previous personnel meeting about moving forward with the filling of that position, and it was kind of a gray area, and it was kicked back here at Government House. So I think the request at this point would be discussion, and if the committee is in agreement, a motion to recommend the filling of the coordinator to the safety officer position from government operations and personnel.
And if I might, this is not a secretarial position by any stretch of the imagination. It's a higher grade than that. It's somebody who's going to develop the training programs. Very much like the staff development coordinator and DSS, I guess, is about something that we already have that I can relate it to in terms of putting it in context. They are going to, like we just are doing 3 days this week of 8-hour-a-day mine safety training for different groups. So it's 1 8-hour class we're doing 3 times in a row. Phil spent about a week and a half developing the curriculum for that, making sure it was updated, making sure it reflected all the regulations, and that's something every town needs to go through if you're operating a pit or you need to go into a pit. So that's developing that, setting up the slides, getting, the location set, everything, took a considerable amount of time that he could have been out looking at projects and things we were doing in the field, and he was in his office developing that program to do next week.
And the mine safety training is a good example of how I feel strongly that there's a need for this position regardless, but the current COVID situation has exacerbated that because in the absence of COVID and the restrictions that have come with it, Phil could have given that mine safety training perhaps at safety days or in one aggregate location in the heart of the county perhaps, but now we can't bring that together. So as Roger was just alluding to, now we've got to do 3 days of it to keep the numbers down to do it. So it just makes things that much harder in that it is harder to do centralized aggregate training because of those restrictions we're under. So I feel strongly that there's a need for the position absent of those factors, but I think those factors just exacerbate.
Matt?
Is it a tested position or exempt?
It's tested.
It will be tested.
So you would look to fill this,
How would you do that? Provisionally?
Because we'd have to order a test, it's a new title on us. And right now, we're unclear on the alacrity with which the state is issuing tests.
It's way too early in the morning for alacrity.
Never too early.
Okay. So you would have to order the test.
Right.
The test would have to be given. It wouldn't be a permanent appointment for several months then.
Well, actually,
Likely a year.
likely longer
Likely
than
a
several
year.
months, right.
A year is a good rule of thumb when you're
Right.
doing a provisional.
So how would you advertise to get a provisional appointment with somebody?
We've already,
done it in the past.
and we had already done it this time. Before we ran into the roadblock we ran into, we had interviews scheduled.
Yeah.
For
Oh, you
folks.
did, okay.
Yeah.
What grade is it, Chris, you know? Roughly.
I wanna say it's either a 13 or a 15.
Yeah, it's in that range.
And that's what it was budgeted for?
Yes.
For 6 months?
Yeah.
What was the deputy position? Was that, when we had a deputy, what was that grade level was that?
Actually, that was a regular safety officer, and that's a couple grades higher than that.
Yeah, we both
It-
agreed. Yeah.
Right, we took it down to coordinator from safety officers, it went down, Melissa classified, I use the term we, Melissa classified things, and that's where she put it on the schedule, and it was approved in the staffing pattern
I'll pull it up.
for this year, just to start the 6 months in.
So we wouldn't be able really to hire anybody until after personnel, so probably we're talking at mid to end of August before you even be able to kind of get the ball rolling, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you get the staffing approval, which is my understanding is the last thing that needs to happen, then we would go ahead. Like I said, we have a good-sized chunk of resumes, we had 4 or 5 people scheduled to talk to.
So you do get 2 months of breakage anyway out of this, right, Brian, if we didn't have anybody scheduled?
Yeah.
Likely.
So, does this also require a staffing pattern change for title?
No,
No, it's already there,
yeah, that's already been done.
right?
But we had
When you adopted
we were that
this year's
far along.
schedule, you
No,
adopted.
wait a minute, did we do deputy or did we coordinator? I thought it was
No,
a change
you
to
did
coordinator.
You did coordinators this year, because
Okay, got
there's
it.
no safety officer. It was
Okay.
changed to coordinator, but it wasn't authorized to fill it until 6 months in.
Any further questions or discussion? Dan Shaw?
Yeah, I understand the need for this, and, I have no problem with the discussion on this. But my concern is the financial aspect, and I might be out of the loop, might have missed a few things in the last couple of weeks. But with the COVID and all the concerns financially, are we gonna be able to afford to keep going like this? I mean, maybe there's something that I'm not aware of, but I think there were 17 county budget officers that commented how they had hiring freezes, didn't hire any of their part-time summer help. Actually, one county I see laid off 90 people due to all this, and now all of a sudden we're acting like there's not a financial concern going forward. And I just don't understand it. If you're saying that everything is fine, then okay, but I just don't understand how we can afford to keep doing it. Or is there something I don't know? And I see the last report came out on, what the tax cap was gonna be. I mean, that didn't look good either. And with the state not paying, that's pulling down our fund balance, so we're gonna miss our interest projections by quite a bit, I think. So how are we pulling this off?
So with this particular, position, the caveat, if you will, is that the way the workers' comp fund has historically been structured, the safety officer, coordinator to the safety officer, and all, pertinent expenses are charged back to philosophy, it's almost impossible to prove what you've avoided, right? So you can't point and say that we avoided $1 million worth of workers' comp claims because they didn't happen. That's the good thing. But the philosophy is that you invest upfront in the safety program to save yourself on the back end of workers' comp claims.
So it's basically on risk and reward, because that's what workers' comp is. And you're paying it out of workers' comp because that's where the reward's supposed to be that offsets the risk. So this one kind of fits for the overall picture of what we're trying to do. But yeah, anytime you hire, it does cost money. But in order to gain, even in other positions throughout the county, in order to get your revenues, somebody has to do the work to get the revenues back. So you can't go so light that you can't get the revenue back either. So there's a happy medium. I don't know that we're going to reach it in 1 year. I'm hoping that we're somewhere close. I think the fact that the sales tax isn't off as bad as we originally had planned and prepared for is helping a little bit. And probably in the next 3 weeks, we're going to know a lot more about whether there's any funding from the state or federal government that's going to send up the next alarm flags. But until then, nobody's been hired, and that's kind of where we're at. I mean, we're backfilling so that the work's being done, and that's pretty much what we've limited it to. But everything else is being pushed down the road or pushed back completely, and we've sent out memos that basically we're looking for no new jobs in next year's budget at all if we can prevent it. You know, we still have to do the upgrades because if people are working out a title, they still have to be, you know, you have to do the upgrades. You don't have much choice on that.
So why are these other counties also concerned? One county laid off 90 people.
Those are much more dependent on sales tax than we are.
Yeah, and some of them did it right.
They're down millions of dollars in sales
If
tax.
you're referring to, was it Schuyler County? I think it was Schuyler that did it right from the get-go.
Yeah.
And they basically, when they put out their memo, here, we're furloughing this many people or laying them off or whatever you want to call it. In the meantime, in came the $600 a week from the federal government. Everyone that got laid off got more money than they would have if they'd stayed working. And they also put a caveat with that, your job will be there when you return. They didn't cut any jobs. They just furloughed them and promised them they'd bring them all back as things turned around. So everyone's at a different level of how they looked at it and how quickly they looked at it. I mean, everyone did something different. And some of them turned out to be ingenious even if they weren't to begin with.
So we were going to be able to stay within our tax cap then with the way everything's looking for you right now.
We'll do whatever it takes to stay within the tax cap. I don't see why you'd ever go over the tax cap at this point in time. I would think we would be way out of line if we did.
It's actually Sullivan County, and they brought back most of the people they furloughed, except for they have not brought back their planning department at this point.
They don't have a plan.
That's where my granddaughter works, so I happen to know that. So anyhow, any other questions? I'll entertain a motion to move forward with filling this position, and we go to personnel, I believe.
Move it.
Moved by Matt Hicks. Do I have a second? Second by Paul Ferguson and Lester Losa. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. You also are looking for approval to submit for a cybersecurity grant?
That's part of the Board of Elections. If you want to go to Board of Elections now, that's fine. It's a subset of Board of Elections.
Okay.
Specifically for them.
We'll do it then.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else, Roger?
No, not under my department, no.
Stephanie?
Yes?
You're up on your new records retention and disposition schedule.
Yes, I sent out an email to everybody on May 26th in regards to an email that we received from the New York State Archives. They have consolidated the existing retention and disposition schedules. As of August 1st, these go into effect. They are giving all government agencies, county and local, till the end of the year to do a resolution to accept the new retention and disposition schedule.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure everybody puts that in the back of their mind, that you've got a couple months to get that done.
Mm-hmm.
I'd highly recommend doing that. It consolidates a lot of different schedules. They had different schedules depending on who you were and what you did, and it kind of consolidates them all into one, and that's one of the things we're not real good at here is knowing what has to go when and then actually purging records. We've got rooms and rooms and rooms of records, and if we can get, better guidance, which I think this is from the state telling us what we have to keep and what we don't have to keep, it'll help us in the long run just with storage space, if nothing else, which is a big problem. But I get regular questions. I'm sure Stephanie gets regular questions about what do I have to keep and what do I not have to keep. And the problem is you have to go to about 15 places to find that out. This breaks down a lot of those different schedules into one master schedule. It's a lot easier to read. So we would need to pass a resolution to adopt it. Right now we're operating under some of the other ones. And it's a fairly simple resolution. We're just adopting the new schedule, and then we can get that out to department heads and other people that deal with records and start taking a look at what we have.
So bring that resolution to the next government officer meeting?
Or just move it to go to the floor to adopt. It's just a schedule. We're either adopting the schedule or not. I mean, we really need to do it because right now we're operating under one of the many schedules that there is, and this would just consolidate into a master schedule. So it's just a simple motion to go ahead and do it. The resolution would be about 3 sentences, whereas there's a new schedule that's recommended. We're now adopting it.
Stephanie, you started to speak?
Melanie, my archivist, has been brought back because it's going to be a lengthy process for her with what we have stored in archives, and I know she has been putting out information already to different departments on stuff that she needs them to sign off to have destroyed. So we're already trying to work in our office on getting things in order so that we can make an easy transition to the new retention schedule.
Okay. So with that, I entertain a motion for a resolution to move to full board on adopting the new records retention disposition schedule.
I'll motion.
Paul Ferguson and Lester Losaw seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. While you're with us, Stephanie, how is DMV doing at this point? We see lines out there, but they're not very long, so I just wondered how it's doing, how the new appointment schedule is working, and if there's anything else that we can do to help you out.
Right now, the appointment scheduling is going good. We've had a couple glitches. Melissa from IT and Dave from No Wait Inside, we have been doing a lot of communication things. If there is a glitch, they're being, getting responded to almost immediately. The customers seem to like it. They like having a time where they can come in. They don't have to wait the hour or two. There's not the long lines. I am very thankful that you all have approved, and the sheriff has approved, having an officer at our door. That has made a huge difference. We have had some situations. They've been able, for the most part, to keep them under control. They have not been called nice names. And they just are taking it in stride, and they're helping so that the brunt of the aggravation is not on the staff, which is huge right now because people are getting very anxious over everything. They're still not getting the whole process that there's still a pandemic out there, and they think, they should be waited on immediately, but we're getting that under control, and we do have all 3 windows open I'd like to open 5, but with the social distancing still, we don't have, you know, the guards in between, so I'm a little hesitant on that aspect yet. But we're trying to bring more people in, so we're averaging about 100 people a day in office, as well as what we're still doing from the drop boxes, the mail, and the dealers that are coming in. And we're about 4 or 5 days behind on processing for that because it is being used. I know I had briefly talked to Chris previously about getting a second drop-off during the day. We do have one out front for the customers that are coming up to the door and asking where the drop-off is. With the fact that we're there, I bring it in every night, I dump it during the day. So that is still a process that is working. I spoke briefly to Brian in regards to Cortland County and how they have their drive-through for their DMV. I found out it's actually just the window. They don't have any of the tubes, from my understanding. She has offered to allow us to go out and take a look at it if anybody is interested. And they do have just certain documents, and it has to, right now they have cash only because they don't have the Verifone to do the credit cards or anything, but they've been doing it for several years.
Okay, thank you. How many people were you normally seeing on a day before all this COVID started? Any idea?
I would say we probably average closer to 250, 300 transactions.
Okay.
And that's with 5 windows open. And with the 5 slots open, it does open an additional 8 appointments a day over a 7-hour period. So you're talking, you know, we could be up to the capacity of at least 156 people once we can get those other 2 windows open.
Okay. Any questions for Steph? Thank you very much, Steph. Anything else you have? Moving on to other business, Board of Elections.
Okay, the budget officer and I met with Board of Elections last week. So the state is putting us in a bit of a bind here in that we don't have an official determination from them as to how the November general presidential election is going to be conducted. That means that what we've heard from NISAC, what I've heard from my colleagues, and what the Board of Elections commissioners think is that the presidential election is likely to be conducted the same way that the June 23rd primary was. As a recap, what that entails is mailing out an absentee ballot to every registered, both inactive and active voter in the county. So for the June 23rd primary, that was 9,700 registered Democrats that had to have ballot applications mailed to them. For the presidential election, it would be roughly 37,000 applications. The issue becomes, so what Board of Elections is proposing to do that initial mailing is they can actually contract with NTS, who's the vendor that does their voter book software, for lack of a better term. It'd be about $35,000 to do that mailing, to send out all of the ballot applications. The issue facing the board at this point is the receipt of the applications. So, for the primary, they sent out 9,753 ballots. They received 2,436 of those applications back. When they get it back, they've got to open it, they've got to review it, they've got to do all that stuff, then they mail the ballot itself out to the individual. Of the 2,436 applications they received, they mailed all of those back and received 1,878 of them back. So as we look at percentages, 25%, 24.98% 20% of the applications they mailed out ended up resulting in an actual ballot. We talked to them a little bit about what an uncontested primary looks like as far as participation as opposed to a presidential general. It's hard to forecast because things were so unique. So for the sake of forecasting, they felt these were decent numbers. We can expect probably 37,000, we know 37,000 applications will be mailed out to voters. We can expect, let's say, a 60% return rate, which would result in 22,200 applications coming back to the Board of Elections, which would be then 22,200 ballots that have to be mailed out. And if we keep that same delta between the two, that would probably be about 18,500 ballots actually mailed back to the Board of Elections. Why I went through all those laborious numbers is the issue that the commissioners are concerned about is actually processing those completed and returned applications and ballots. So what they currently do is they open everything by hand, they bring it out, they stamp it in. When the application is received, they review it for completeness, accuracy, and if it checks all the boxes, then once a day, they run a batch of ballots through their system that conforms with all the applications they've received. Then they fold those ballots by hand, put all the envelopes together, put the labels on the envelopes, and then for this election, I was buying them rolls of stamps every 2 days when they needed them. They put stamps on the envelopes and mail them out. That was very strenuous, but just workable for them for the primary, with a volume of 2,400 applications coming in and 1,800 ballots coming in. With the numbers they're looking at for the general election, they don't think they will be able to keep up with that at all. What they proposed to the budget officer and I was a couple pieces of equipment that they feel will allow them to meet the workload of physically processing this paper. So the one, I'll go through the whole package first. So the first is a folder. So right now they print out the big ballots and they fold them by hand. If they're going to be sending out 22,000 of them, that's probably not realistic. They worked with Warren and Saratoga County. They found a folder that Warren County uses and works for them, and that costs $1,945. The next thing is a letter opener. I don't know how this works exactly, but apparently it opens the phone. That is $1,584. They shared with us, I was not aware of this, so I know they have to stamp in every application and ballot that's received, right, to make sure that it's done by the right time frame. The current clock they have to actually take the piece of paper and punch it in 3 times. What they're requesting is a clock that puts the Board of Elections, the date and the time on it, one stamp to cut that workload by a third. The cost of that new time stamp clock is $949. The biggest issue is when they get the completed ballots back, how they count and enumerate them within the system. The current way basically is they have their machine set up and they sit there and they physically feed ballots through the electronic ballot voting machine.
One machine for each district, right?
Correct. So you'd have
Just as if it's
you'd have
an actual
all
election.
machines set up in the Board of Elections office.
And you segregate them by which district?
Correct.
And then you go to each machine?
You go, and I think Leslie said they could do about 20 an hour per machine with the way. What they have proposed is the only machine that is certified by the State Board of Elections, and it is a high-speed scanner and ballot counter. This one will do up to 4,000 ballots an hour. The price for this all in is $46,000 for this scheme. Now that being said, apparently Saratoga County, there are 2 parts to this. There's a scanner, and then there's the hardware of the automatic document feeder and the software to read the ballot and count it, interface with the election software. The scanner component of this, in the quote from the company, is $17,500. apparently what Saratoga County was able to do was to go out to a third-party vendor and buy a high-speed scanner for $7,000 that works with this system. So they were able to save $10,000 off the purchase price. That is something that the commissioners are working with the Saratoga County Board of Elections with to see how they did it and if that can work for us. The request that I'm bringing forward from the commissioners today would be, if the committee is in agreement, to authorize the purchase of the full machine at the $46,000 with the understanding that that would be the high price, and then the board would try to work out this third-party scanner to try and save us as much as they can. So all that being said, that equipment altogether is $50,568. There is currently, plus or minus a few dollars, $40,000 left in their emergency federal grant that we recognized earlier this year. So if the board approved their applying the $40,000 remaining on that grant toward these equipment, we'd be looking at roughly $11,000 in direct county costs to try and outfit them with the equipment that the commissioners feel they need to be able to actually implement the November general election.
That was all the folder, the letter opener, the whole bit.
Yes, the $50,500 is the high-speed ballot scanner, the ballot folder, the letter opener, and the timestamp.
Were there other items they had planned to use the $40,000 for, that now have to find someplace else to fund them for?
Yeah, very good question. So the other thing that we could use that $40,000 for would be the postage that is going to be involved in administering the general election. So it's hard to forecast at this point exactly how much that is going to cost, but it could be quite costly.
And you're gonna pay that either way.
So,
Yes,
Even if it's not budgeted, you're gonna pay that.
well, you have to, but to Mr. O'Brien's point, if you
Yep.
didn't spend the $40,000 of the grant money on this equipment, you could use that $40,000 to offset the postage costs, which could be north of $100,000 all in for this election. So they're not insignificant.
question is that you said you were buying rolls of stamps.
Yes.
Should they consider going to a service that does it, run it through instead of doing the laborious task of putting the stamps on everything? Because
They're gonna have to for the bigger election, yes, we've already had that conversation.
Okay.
Plus the postmasters in Fort Edward and Hudson Falls are about done with it. Right, bought them out multiple times.
So, we're talking to $51,000. We're supposing that we're gonna need close to $100,000, if not more, for postage for this election.
Yeah.
Has there been a directive that we are going to go to all mail-in voting at this point?
So constitutionally, the governor cannot move us to all mail-in voting. There's a quirk that he can't do that, he tried. So the way he got around it, for lack of a better term, is that under the constitutional provisions, Roger can vote down when I go astray. Under the constitutional provisions currently, you have to provide a reason for absentee voting. One of those absentee voting, reasons is illness. So what the governor was able to do through executive order was he was able to classify COVID-19 or a concern about contracting COVID-19 as an illness that qualified for a reason to vote absentee. So then, the next step of that was to then issue an executive order that mandated all Board of Elections mail absentee ballot applications to every registered voter for the primary. We're anticipating he's going to do the same thing for the general, but we don't know yet.
Okay.
We're not, Vermont's, you probably heard, just mailing ballots. New York's not doing that. They'll mail you the application. If you return the application, then they'll mail you a ballot. Otherwise, you have to show up and vote in person. So this will, we didn't have a big primary, so a lot of people didn't have to go through that process. But it's gonna be the same process that was used in the primaries, we hope. We hope.
And so Roger raises a good point that I meant to mention earlier and I forgot, and that is that with all this additional cost we're looking at of equipment and postage to be able to do the ballot applications, as we did for the primary, what we were successful in doing for the primary election was the Board of Elections reduced the number were 9,753 registered Democrats able to vote in the June primary. 739, or 7.58%, voted in person. We would anticipate that to be higher for a presidential election, but you don't know, given that people will have absentee ballot applications sent. So that's a variable, but what we're being told at this point is we will have to operate all of the poll sites. So $36,000 is what we normally budget for a general presidential election. We will have some increased costs this year in addition to that $36,000 because there is currently an executive order that has been extended that requires us to completely decontaminate a poll site the day before the election and the day after. And that is a cost that we have to absorb. So we are contracting with the company to do that since we don't have to. We are also, when we talked to Leslie and Jeff, we're going to need another 20 or 30 of the plexiglass barriers, and those are running about $100 a piece right now, a little bit over, so that'll be another $3,000 in barriers for the election.
Brian?
So we have money budgeted this year for postage, we have money budgeted for the election, but we know we're gonna be far short because of, do we know, I mean, if we were gonna do this, why wouldn't we have a budget amendment that would move all that to what we think it is to once, or would you rather do it at the end after it's finished? I guess I'm trying to.
So, the direct answer to your question is right now, I don't have enough information to make an accurate budget amendment, and I don't want to have to do it multiple times. The hope would be to do a budget amendment before the election so that the board has a clear picture of what the cost is, if we can. I was waiting, and the commissioners were so busy wrapping up other stuff, they didn't have a chance to do it. We had some savings in the beginning of the year, right, because there were a couple primaries that were supposed to happen that didn't, and then we were able to do the June 23rd primary in a little bit lower scale than we thought we were going to. So there's breakage from the earlier part of the year, then there's going to be a huge cost in November that we weren't anticipating. So I'm giving you kind of the raw numbers, the best I can forecast right now. Those are worst case scenarios. I don't have the net yet.
So will the breakage cover the 11,000 we need on the equipment? And then all we would have is the money for the excess postage?
Yes, if you look at it that way, the numbers will work.
Okay, because I think that's significant for number one, and number two, I think that because one of the most important things we need is to have a guaranteed election that's done right. This might be more important than sometimes we've looked at.
Yeah, and I mean,
it's a very interesting situation we're in right now.
It is, to Mr. Shaw's point, I'm not wild about, trying to
Spending the money on it.
spend $50,000 on equipment in the current situation, but on the other hand, when you look through the physical sheer volume of
Yeah, you couldn't even hire a person.
have to handle.
Yeah, you couldn't even hire an extra person to work for the year to do that.
No, it's not feasible to do it the way we've done it in the past because they've changed the rules.
And this equipment should last for a few years. I mean, I don't know the life of the equipment, but I'm thinking it would be used for more elections to come. It's not really a one-time thing.
No, not at all. The voting machines we've had for almost 15 years. 12, maybe.
I think it's less than that. I was on the board when we bought the new machines.
Where?
That's been 10 years.
Is it coming up on 10?
Yeah.
Probably because it doesn't seem like we've been told on that. I wouldn't rest on their laurels on those machines.
No, we got
They were purchased in 2010.
Sorry.
Okay.
That's what
I
I would expect a similar lifespan.
At least 10. That's what I'm saying. So if that's the case and you break it down, it doesn't feel as bad, but it's still not money you want to spend. But I think because the sanctity of the ballot is important, that maybe this might be important.
Okay. I think the other thing that, with that volume going out and mail coming back and forth, I think it's gonna be very strenuous for them to make sure they have the checks and balances in place so that multiple ballots aren't coming in versus people vote in person versus we get electronic ballot in for them too, and, you know, it's gonna be all this extra work for them to do, and I
Yeah,
think
and
we're gonna have personnel costs, they're gonna,
You make a good point, but I do wanna say that I think the election commissioners have a good system where they can do it to make sure that there aren't any errors. They are very conscientious like that, but, that's laborious to.
Yeah, well, that's what I think he was saying, that they get wore down from all that extra, that
Dave,
it's
good now.
easier for things to slip.
Pardon?
Good now.
Oh, yes.
Chris, since this is a presidential election, have we reached out to our liaison at FEMA to see if any of this is gonna be FEMA grant eligible?
Yeah, that would be a no.
That's
So we
great.
haven't reached out, or we know it's not eligible.
I know it's.
Do they say yes to anything?
No.
Then they change their mind.
We're gonna talk about that shortly.
Okay, so that's where we're at, and I've just,
Good try, huh?
I just heard on the radio come over this morning, based on ballots. They sent the Spanish-speaking ballots to the English-speaking people and vice versa, and this was in Maryland. I just thought that was, it doesn't matter. Okay, I'll need a motion, if there's no other discussion, need a motion to move that for purchase of these equipment.
Moving it to finance?
Move to finance.
I'll move it to finance.
Matt moves to finance. Do I have a second? Second by Paul Ferguson. Any further discussion? All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. There was the request from Roger, needs to look at doing a cyber grant for security.
Right, so the Board of Elections, was asked to be part of a pilot program for, endpoint detection and response identifiers, which is basically, the state monitoring system would install software on our, internet-connected devices in the Board of Elections and provide us for free monitoring. Now, heavy emphasis on the fact that the machines themselves are not hooked up to the internet. There's not gonna be any other, you know, stuff installed on the machines. This will go on our network, with a specific focus, and Terry's on, I see, and she can talk to me if I go astray this time, but it's installed on our network, and so the monitoring is provided by this, Internet Resource Center that does a lot of our monitoring now and notifies us of threats. It's a pilot project. There's no direct cost to us for the software. There might be some indirect costs in terms of when we have to put it in, you know, integrate it into our system. We have consultants that help us do that integration. There might be a cost there, but it's basically a free monitoring system, by a separate entity that's affiliated, with the state and the Internet Threat System to, monitor our system. And again, we're one of the, because we have such a good cybersecurity system, set up, and because Karen's so involved, we were asked to participate in this project, or asked if we wanted to, as a pilot. And so that's been afforded to us, but they obviously want to get the stuff in place, make sure it's working, and accurately, providing us the information before we get to election time. So we would need a motion out of, the committee to go ahead and sign up for this program, if we're interested in doing that. And if Terry has anything additional to add, I'd love to hear it, because she could probably wallow in the technical stuff. We're not, I'm gonna analogize it to, because we don't use brand names here to talk about what kind of software we're using. It's like somebody's gonna come and they're gonna basically install EDT on our house and monitor it for us, and then let us know if there's a problem. Our election house. But this is not hooked up to any machines. This is not any software that, you know, affects the way the machines work, tally, or anything else, because the machines aren't hooked up to the internet. They're completely offline, completely separate devices.
Okay. A motion to engage in the pilot. Terry, did you have anything to say, or did he cover it well enough?
I think he covered it pretty well. The software would essentially go on the workstations that the Board of Election uses, as well as the servers. And then they have a sensor installed in our environment. So I think it's a great opportunity to give some additional security products a try. It would give us a year worth of coverage, and then we can make some decisions whether we continue it or not from there.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to engage, to participate in this pilot project.
I can move that, Dave.
Lester moves it. Do I have a second?
I second it.
Second by Paul. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Chris, what else? Technology.
Technology. So, to the treasurer's previous question, unfortunately, I'm more than a little frustrated with, FEMA at the moment. So, Tim and I started putting together the first application for FEMA reimbursement. We had a couple conference calls with our, state rep for the process last week. And one of the things that surprised both Tim and I was we were told, or initially, way back at the beginning, anything we needed to operate under COVID would be eligible for. Then what we were told, last week was that the IT expenses that we had incurred, which was the purchases of laptops and conference phones and stuff, would not be. And the argument from FEMA, I felt, was a little specious in that it was, we were only eligible for expenses that directly were resulting from our control and to stop the spread of COVID-19. And it was, we were only eligible for reimbursement that were for things that were done, under our authority. And so, when I initially made the argument to FEMA that we had incurred these additional IT expenses because we were under an executive order, by the governor to reduce our staff by at least 50%, and the only way we could do that and continue to provide mandated services to the public was investing in remote work technology, we were told, well, yeah, that's an eligible expense, but it's eligible for the governor, and then we would have to apply for, we would have to petition the governor to have him put our costs on his FEMA application, and then hope that he passed the money along. We have crafted a very careful, argument that we were trying to stop the spread of COVID by reducing the density of staff in the office to less than 50% of our normal staff. And we were fortunate in that, we issued an executive order from the chairman the day that we reduced operations that did not reference the executive order of the governor. So what we have done is kind of retooled our argument to say that we were trying to stop the spread of COVID-19. We did it under the chairman's authority and incurred those IT expenses. We got past the first, firewall, pun intended, on that one of DHSES, and they are now escalating that up to FEMA food chain. So we will do our best to try to get those costs recouped. Why I went down that, laborious side path was that, Terry has worked closely with, Tim down at Public Safety to come up with a proposal, to invest in some technology to help with the remote meetings. The total cost comes to $8,200, and I'll run through quickly, what that entails. So this would be for the classroom, not here. And it's a combination of the classroom and the mobile cart. So this would be, 2 cameras, much higher quality than the ones on our laptops, and ones that we can have posted in the room, to cover the entire meeting. Second item would be a monitor to be mounted on the wall in the classroom. The 2 cameras, one is for the classroom, one is for the cart. Second item, or the third item, I'm sorry, would be 2 HDMI, receiver kits to make the TV talk to the camera, and a computer to go in the classroom. Probably the one item that we need, regardless of whether we go forward with these technology improvements in the classroom and the cart, are 10 Zoom meeting business licenses. Those are important. I can let Terry speak more articulately as to why. The cost for those is $1,700 for the year, and that is something that I would advocate strongly that we move forward with regardless. And then the final would be $400 for another one of those conference phones to live in the classroom. So the downside is it's $8,200. I have little, optimism that it'll be covered by FEMA. But we're putting it out there to the board with the understanding that, in all likelihood, well, two things. We may be operating under the current operational conditions for a considerable length of time, another 6-9 months. And one thing we've talked internally at the staff level is that we currently have an executive order out there that mandates we make all meetings of public bodies available to the public via YouTube. I don't see that mandate going away when the pandemic is over. So this would be somewhat forward-looking in saying that the way we conduct meetings is likely changed irrevocably. And even when all 17 of you are around the chambers here, we may still be having to stream the meetings to the public. This technology would help us facilitate that. So the suggestion at this point, should the committee be receptive to it, would be to make a set of budget amendment to finance to appropriate $8,200 out of the general fund contingency account into the appropriate accounts in IT to effectuate these purchases. All the installation work will be done by buildings and grounds and IT. The current general fund contingency budget level is $120,398. So that would bring it down to about $112,000.
So a question on the Zoom licenses. I know one version of the Zoom license, they will, as part of the fee, they will do the transcript. So it save us, is this included in this package?
I believe it is, but I'll let Terry jump in.
Yes, it is.
So
Yeah,
that
that's
would
part of the
alleviate
business
some
license.
costs we might be getting from having this farmed out to do it someplace else. But that would be up to Deb, but I'm just
I
saying.
can't answer that question directly because we may be under contract for those transcripting services, but perhaps at the end of that contract.
Okay, just curious.
Chris, can we anticipate any money, like COLAs and stuff would add to our, that's where we would put it in contingency? Under the circumstances, will there be any of that money coming with?
Very difficult for me to say at this point.
That's what I'm,
In order to be conservative, I would say let's not count on it.
Right, I'm thinking contingency money is just gonna disappear. I don't see where it's gonna,
Well,
sometimes it's backloaded as we go through the year, and I don't know if that's coming.
I don't either. Hopefully, if what Congresswoman Stefanik said and what the congressional leadership is signaling at this point, hopefully the picture around potential federal direct funding to municipalities should solidify prior to the next finance. So I know you and I are working on a report to the board for that finance meeting. We're thinking that this last level of the stimulus that is supposed to include direct funding to states and localities should be finalized, at least along the way. So I would say for now, try to make the decision, assuming that there's nothing else coming for the contingency fund.
That's kind of where I'm at.
But there may be by the time we get to finance.
Okay. And I see Senator Gillibrand was also on that bandwagon yesterday.
I listened to an interview with Senator Schumer this morning as well. I mean, our federal delegation is all pretty much in agreement on trying to support direct funding for actually everybody. Our federal delegation is on board with giving funding directly to the
Local municipalities.
where our federal delegation is somewhat split, and I think the overall congressional delegations is whether there should be funding to states or not. The issue, and I know you and I have talked about it, is that if we get funding from the federal government directly at the county level, but the state doesn't get anything, I don't know I don't think we'll be any better off.
No, our percentage goes from 20 to 30.
If we get $5 million from the feds, we'll probably get $5 million less from the state. Our best case scenario is that we get some kind of direct funding from the federal government, but almost more importantly, the state gets a significant amount of federal funding. And that, I think, is a big question mark as this package starts to solidify.
Same concern.
I'll move it to finance.
Matt moves to finance, do I have a second? Second by Paul Ferguson. Any further discussion, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
so the last, thing that I have under other, and I apologize, Mr. Chairman, I forgot this morning, until I got a text from our illustrious buildings and grounds superintendent. The committee may remember that for some time now, there has been discussion about a dredging project up at the Washington County Hewlett Landing Park. And there was one project done a year or two ago, and now the adjacent homeowners are recommending a dredging project on the other side of our beach. Originally, when we were approached by this, the request was that A, we allow the project to take place on our property, and B, that we lend some assistance in the way of manpower and equipment to haul out dredge spoils and potentially even dump dredge spoils, whether it's on the town of Dresden or our property. One of the reasons that the superintendent had recommended moving forward with that at the time was that in order to do the dredging, there was going to be a retaining wall or a break wall built, and then that was going to be left after the project was done. That has some advantages to us as the property owner of the park operator. Apparently, as the permit process has progressed through the Brintian oversight agencies, the ability for that retaining wall to be retained has evaporated. And so in some conversations with the buildings and grounds superintendent, without that retaining wall being left after the project is completed, there isn't really a long-term benefit to us as the property owner and the park operator, and therefore we wanted to have a discussion with the oversight committee about whether we should continue to hold a stance that we will allow the project to proceed and allow them to use our property to do the project, but since there is no benefit to us and then therefore vicariously the taxpayers, we will not lend manpower and equipment to the project. And I'll let Matt jump in if he's got additional input on that.
So I think it was our last government ops, we had okayed the use of so many trucks for so many loads for so many days. You know, that was our county resource, and we had a place, you know, to go at the time that was specified with what they call the soils or the spoils from the dredging project. So to make it short, we don't have a place to take them. We would be responsible to take them somewhere. And two, like Chris alluded to, our retaining wall is no longer part of the project. So, you know, in my opinion, there's not much benefit anymore to the county. I still recommend letting them use our beach to do their project. I just don't recommend letting them use our resources to complete the project that benefits them and not us. That'd be up to you guys, though.
Questions or comments? Brian?
It's still advantageous to the park that this be done though, or not really?
No.
I'd say we're neutral.
We're kind
Yeah,
of
we're
neutral in
neutral.
this.
Yeah,
So
instead of a
therefore,
game, we're neutral.
Paul, is this worthwhile for Dresden to do for the town to step in and do that in place of the county, or is that not even, a local issue?
It's a local issue. I just don't know whether, I don't know why, the plans have been changed, to tell you the truth. I guess I'd have to talk to Matt and see how his feelings are.
Just so you know, Paul.
If there was a way to help everyone out, maybe we just get out of the way might be the best part. If there was a way that it helps Dresden, if you're just talking trucking the little stuff away, that there's something they can do something with, that's one thing, but I didn't want to stop something that was advantageous to them, I guess was my concern.
Matt?
The scope included us trucking stone from Peckham's to the job site to do the job, and it was also trucking the spoils away from there. What changed was the oversight agencies won't let them leave that barrier in the water anymore. And through some sort of laws about the spoils of the project, they can't go to a personal place because of the possibility of them making money on it is, you know, the short, simple terms. Like there's certain laws that because they came out of that lake, they can't go to a compost pile that somebody's selling compost in either. So they either got to go to garbage or it's a totally different permit process. You can get into it deep. I mean, there's pages and pages of permitting applications and emails back and forth, but I'm trying to keep it like on a simple level. That's what it is.
So action do you need out of this committee?
So if the committee is receptive to modifying our approval, then it would be a motion from this committee to allow the permit applicant to utilize our property to conduct the project. But the county would not be providing any manpower or equipment to help facilitate the project.
Who moved? That was Matt? Matt make a motion, do I have a second? Do I have a second? Lester and Dan Shaw. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried? Any other items?
All I have, Chairman.
So I'm just curious with the impact of the school system, is that gonna have an impact on our, how they're gonna do their scheduling and classes? Is that gonna have an impact on our county workers, or?
Yeah, it's something, we had an incident management team meeting, last week, and that was something I brought up, and I think maybe, just because of where I am in my life, it's something I'm kind of hyper-focused on at the moment. What we're hearing anecdotally, not from any particular school system, this is just kind of what's floating around out there, is that the schools are looking at some kind of a hybrid model come September, whereby, I'll just use an example, if you have a class, say a second grade class with 30 kids in it, that class would be broken into two groups of 15. One group would be physically in the classroom, let's say Monday and Tuesday. The other group, Group B, will be home, zooming into the lessons being provided by the teacher, while Group A is physically in the classroom. Then they would transition and flop for Wednesday and Thursday, whereby Group B would physically be in the classroom, Group A would be home, zooming into the meeting, and then on Friday, everybody would be remote, and the teacher would just conduct all the education remotely. As we talked about last week at the board meeting, that raises some serious issues for parents who don't have broadband at their homes, and it certainly for employees with little kids like myself, it raises some serious issues about the logistics of childcare and trying to facilitate that learning model for your kids and being able to meet your work requirements. So, to your question directly, Chairman O'Brien, I think it speaks to the importance of what we spoke about last time, which is the continued ability for department heads to allow staff to work remotely when in their discretion it is appropriate and efficient and effective. But I don't know yet what we can do as an employer, because we don't have any guidance from the state or from the schools. But I do see it as a potentially large issue for us as a large-scale employer of what it will do to our workforce. And I'm certainly open to any thoughts and suggestions, because I'll tell you, I don't have a good answer to this one.
So we're probably gonna have to wait to see what school systems are affected. I know that some of them feel they have the capability to do in school. They can still maintain social distancing and everything without doing some distance learning, which is good, because some of these don't have the broadband in their communities to achieve that. So we'll have to see what happens, but we're gonna have to reach out to help somehow gonna have to help our employees through this difficult time.
Yeah, I mean, just, purely personally, not as the administrator, just as a father, I want all the kids back in school 5 days a week, because, this has not been good for my son, but, I don't know if that's a realistic opportunity. I think we have to be, able and willing to adjust whatever way we can, given what the schools actually come up with.
Thank you.
And that, some of that could be relatively easy too, because if you have a certain group that can work from home, they could work from home on the days, maybe that their kids aren't in school, and so they can be in two places at once, because daycare is a huge issue right now. I mean, there may be opportunities there, and then some people don't want it. They would rather be working at home when the kids are in school, but, so it's according to who has daycare or not, so that make them down. I mean, we're putting a lot more onus on our department heads right now.
Yes.
And it's it is paid off because they've done an incredible job.
They have.
But I think that this might be another one that's put on them to juggle who's at home and who's not, so.
It's gonna have to be, because there is no way that at this level, at the board, the committee, or
We're not gonna,
at this
yeah.
level, that we can do anything that's really gonna work across the organization. We have to, I think what we have to do is communicate really clearly and put in place the parameters for our department heads to then implement with their staff, because there's no way that we can control something this individualized and this complex at this level. So I think we just need to try to give everybody the tools and the support that we can to make sure that our work and our mission is still being completed, and finding a way to get it going.
From the town side, I reached out to the, school superintendent, and suggested that we have a town hall and we have the fire department. If in fact they're doing distance learning, there may be a way, or suggest they think about a way that the kids who don't have internet could go in there. Creates a supervision issue too, but, you know, it's at least a way to help people get the ability, or students get the ability to use internet if there's distance learning involved. And so, I don't know where it's gonna go from there, but it might be a suggestion, think so, outside the box.
It's a new way to attract new firemen.
There's a good idea too. Anything else for the committee?
Hold on, I might have something else. Breaking news.
Matt, you didn't talk about the word specious. You used the word specious. You didn't say it was too early for specious.
Use the Corinthian too.
Yeah.
I gotta bring up the
I'm a
story.
big day story fan.
I gotta bring up these stories at the committee meetings from now on. Or maybe I have to have Roger translate, or these are all Latin, but Roger knows seem to come looking at this right.
Okay, so I apologize for the late nature of this. In the vein of what we were just talking about, one of the issues, that we have found that is probably the most problematic for having people work remotely, right, is that with the laptops and, the great job that IT has done in outfitting everybody with that and new connectivity that we have, email and Teams and all that is pretty seamless, right? The Achilles heel, for lack of a better term, of truly seamless remote work for us is phones. And there are a couple options, and I'll walk you through them. The one would be that, let's say that Sue in my office is gonna work from home Monday and Tuesday. That's what she probably does. So on Friday, when she leaves the office, she can punch some kind of secret code on her handset that would forward her, desk phone to her home phone, okay? So then, on Monday, when she's working from home, somebody dials her number, it would ring on her home phone, she could pick it up, and we could do it that way. Problem with that is, A, then we're using an employee's home phone, which is icky, and I let Roger speak to that. The bigger issue with what we're facing right now is that for every call that came into Sue's phone, it would tie up two of our phone trunks. One incoming, then the software would do its thing, and it sends it back out on a different trunk. As the clerk, if she's still on the call, can attest to, we have an unbelievable call volume in DMV right now, and it is, routinely shut down our phone system across the entire county. So, tying up two lines for every call to facilitate phone forwarding is really kind of a non-starter. Some of us, there aren't many, but some of us in the county have, what we call IP phones, which is our phone actually goes over the internet, right, instead of going on the traditional copper type thing. There is a way where I can take my IP phone off my desk, take it home, plug it in, and it could talk to the phone system here, and when somebody dialed my extension, it could ring it back. There's a pretty significantly expensive couple pieces of hardware and software we would need to install here at the county to allow that IP phone to work remotely as though it were located here. And then that's problematic because the IP phones are relatively expensive and you can't deploy them to everybody that would need them. And then there's a significant upfront cost. So Terry, once again, hats off to Terry. She's come up with a solution called a soft phone. I'm going to explain it the best I understand it at this point, and she can explain it better when I'm done, if she needs to. The idea behind the soft phone is that it is a software that runs on my laptop, okay? And if I am home working and I have that software app running, if somebody dials calls in, to my number with the 746 in front of it, it will ring to this. I can also make outgoing calls from my soft phone on my computer, and it will appear as though I am dialing from my extension here in the county. In kicking around a lot of different ideas about how to try to potentially solve the phone issue with remote work, this is the best option we've been able to come up with. Terry was working with the company this morning feverishly. She just emailed me over a quote. I'm going to bottom line it for you, and then Terry can answer any details. But for 50 licenses, all in, everything installed, that we would need to make it work, it's $16,800. Terry, or if you're still on, is there anything else you'd like to add to all that?
The only other thing I would add is that the soft phone itself, it's not just a laptop, so it can also work on a cell phone. So if we have county issued cell phones, it's an app that gets downloaded from the App Store, and it can function just like your extension here at the office without having to give out that cell phone number to people. So it really is a great solution. The other, a couple problematic things just with the first two options, just to kind of go through, where Chris had said if somebody were to bring home or forward out the phone lines, the other issue with that I've even come across in the past is you forward out to somebody's cell phone or somebody's home phone. If you don't answer, it goes to that personal voicemail. It's off the county network. So you don't have that ability any longer. So that would be a problem. The second option, in terms of IP phones, the big problem with IP phones is that if I have an IP phone and I want to bring it home, they're not wireless. So somebody would have to have a modem, they would have to have a router, they would have to have Cat5 cabling running from wherever their device is in their personal home over to where their desk is and they're trying to work. So that's another downside of the IP phones, in addition to the expense of the separate server to do that. So the soft phone just really gives us some great flexibility to be able to make and send out or make and receive calls like you're sitting at the county. I know this has been, from an IT perspective, it's been a big issue. I know my cell phone is certainly out there now, which is not a big deal. You know, it is what it is. But I think that it certainly causes some challenges when you start to deviate from the published numbers that people are calling.
So it's $16,000 for the first shot, and there's maintenance costs after that annually?
No, this is just a purchase of the software. There's not maintenance in addition to that. The server, there's no hardware. It's really all licensing. So once we own the licensing, we own it. We'll be spinning up, from a technology standpoint, a virtual server that we have to then put on the outside of the network to be able to connect everything in. But no, these are just licensing costs.
Is 50 a number we expect is about what we need?
It's our best guess at this point, yes.
Because, I mean, some people won't even need this service. Other people definitely need the service. But so you've been through trying to, and this was your best guess at this point.
You figure we have 26 department heads, each of them one, and then you've got
A deputy in a lot of them.
Yeah, you've got at least 24 other people just underneath them. So,
Okay.
yeah, I think 50 is a good start.
Okay, so that's, I was just see where you derive from. Okay.
So, any other questions for Chris or Terry?
Terry, is it cheaper if you add on, if we find this becomes a necessity because it does work well or something?
Yeah,
or is
so
it just for license?
So it's just the licenses. And so if we were to add on, for example, the 50 licenses that we're looking to start off with are $8,000. So when you break it down by just that one component, that would be all we would need to add on in the future to add more licenses.
So what is the other $8,000 for? I think Chris said $16,000?
Yeah, there's a virtual server license. So there's a couple other licenses you have to purchase to add it onto our phone system. And then there's the installation by the vendor.
Almost better news. Because if we find out we need 100, it's only another 8,000, not another 6,000. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you. Anyone like to make a motion to move this to finance? Oh, Paul. Paul made a motion, do I have a second?
Like that last.
Lester? Lester, second. Any further discussion, questions? Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, Chris, is this in the IT budget, or is this gonna come out of contingency?
The plan for this would be contingency.
So, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried? Thank you. Any other further business? Anything else? Break the ice, Chris? Okay, motion to adjourn. Paul, do I have a second? Lester? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.